So a rabbi was in the middle of his Kol Nidre sermon, and he starts banging on the bima in the middle of the sermon. And he looks out to the congregation and says, "Wake up! Wake up to the fact that every single person in this congregation, myself included, is going to die." And as he expected, there was panic, a hubbub in the room. Just total tumult. People are yelling, people are screaming, people are crying. But one man, sitting in the 7th row, is just sitting there with a weird smile on his face. And the rabbi notices it and doesn't understand. He looks at him. "Did you not hear what I said? Every single person in this congregation is going to die. Why are you smiling?" He says, "I'm not in this congregation. I'm just visiting my sister." I have cried a lot this past year. I've cried for my father. I've cried for Israel. I've cried for Jews, for our broken society, and I'm grateful for every tear. Weeping helps me feel big things better. Crying helps me understand what it is I'm feeling. Recently, I noticed myself crying in the middle of the day. I had been daydreaming about my daughter's upcoming wedding. And when I interrogated myself as to why I was crying, my own answer inside my head surprised me. These were not just tears of joy and gratitude. It was not just the ache that my father, who spoke at my wedding, because his father, who would have spoken at my wedding, had recently died. Not just the ache that my father would not be at my daughter's wedding. It was not only the pathos of celebrating amidst a wounded world. I was crying for the same reason every wedding that I perform moves me. They are getting married, and I hope they will be happy together. I was crying because they, like all couples, will confront strife. They will argue. All couples confront doubt and at times question their couplehood. I was crying because by gaining one another, they are destined to lose. I tell couples in my office as we plan the wedding, to choose to marry is to choose to mourn or to be mourned. To deny it is ludicrous. We don't advertise that at wedding receptions, but it's true. I cried because there is love in marriage and there is loss. I cried because I hope that they will be blessed with healthy children, and because raising children can be crushingly hard. Even in a happy home, there are tears. I cried because as I sing them off to a wedded life, only a fool would actually think that what is coming up is uninterrupted bliss. What follows amid joy and laughter and sweetness includes some measure of bitter disappointment and ultimately, yes, death. One of them attending to the others. There's no other way. So, mazel tov. With all that, is marriage worth it? I certainly think so. And there's at least one person in the room who's very happy with that answer. And that question is simply a miniature of the actual question. Is life worth it? Imagine a world where every soul about to be born already had mature consciousness. Suppose that soul about to be born were shown the full balance of party and pity that is to come. What percentage would choose to come into being? Our great sages grappled with this. In Tractate Eruvin in the Talmud, we read of Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai and their longest debate, a spiritual and philosophical tug-of-war lasting years. One side said, Noach lo la'adam shelo nivra yoter mishenivra. It would have been better for humanity never to have been created. The other side countered, Noach lo la'adam shenivra yoter mishelo nivra. It is better to exist than to not exist. And the Hebrew is deliciously ambiguous, as if the question is both personal, about one of us, or universal, about all of us. Is it worth it? Are life and love worth the outrageous slings of arrows, the impermanence of joy, and the inevitability of pain and death? With all of the flowers and the beauty and the ugliness and the obstacles, the dark nights of sleepless suffering and terrifying turmoil, is it worth it? The Talmud's resolution splits the difference. It would have been better not to have been created, they wrote. But since we were created, yifashfesh b'masav, scrutinize your deeds. In other words, maybe non-existence would spare us pain. Choosing not to enter the entanglement that is marriage can be, in theory, easier than all that nuptials obligates a couple to. But none of us chose to be born. We arrived after that decision was made for us. And given life's burdens, yifashfesh ma'asav, the best approach is to look at one's deeds, one's own choices, and do what we can to make life sweeter, to make marriage stronger, to make being here so much better than not being here. Marriage has love and loss. Every couple who works with me knows it. Life has love and loss. The Talmud knew it. And the Talmud is not the only trove that confronts these profound questions. Poets and philosophers penned pearls about it, such as Tennyson's delightful verse, "'Tis better to have loved and lost than..." Sartre and Camus turned resolutely toward the existential trajectory: birth, relationship, sickness, death, probing whether meaning can be forged when youth and beauty inexorably yield to decline. And so my mind travels to a beautiful, hopeful young couple. I am aware on some heavy level that the fanfare, the gusto, the ruach of the wedding do not say it all. There is more hovering beyond the chuppah. And that hovering is the subtext of today. Yom Kippur carries two modes. One is exaltation. With teshuvah and devotion, we have hopefully earned another year on this earth. At the Avodah service tomorrow afternoon, when we sing of the high priest's emergence from the Holy of Holies, radiant and purified, we're going to sing a raucous celebratory tune. Today is a day of hooray. We will chant with glee as we reach the last Avinu Malkeinu in 25 hours, hear a long shofar blast, embrace one another, and begin again to feed ourselves. Begin again to doing what living people do, because today we are present. But the other side of Yom Kippur rehearses absence, our own. We wear white robes as Jews wear for eternity. We eschew comfort, as corpses do not feel. We abstain from food and drink, and from intimacy that produces new life. We dance a macabre dance today as living ghosts, reminding ourselves that life does not go on forever. And the part of us that aches for permanence knows that every lifetime carries pain and cannot endure endlessly. Yom Kippur, in its stark solemnity, is both a celebration of being and a rehearsal for not being. Yom Kippur has love and loss. And every wedding leads to every marriage that will struggle and one way or another will end. And so I cried. Judaism is very unromantic and unsentimental about life and death. There is much wisdom in our end-of-life and grieving rituals. I'm going to be teaching a class about them in the fall, primarily geared towards pressman parents, but all are welcome. Our biblical ancestors could not have imagined our technology or our comforts of modernity, but they knew some profound things. They didn't have iPhones. They didn't know the word philosophy, but they lived and they cried and they thrilled and they struggled and they died. And their raw human experience is likely not that much different than our own. And they produced illuminating wisdom. One such wisdom emerges from my favorite interpretation of the opening lines of Parshat Tazria. Tazria is all about skin diseases, oozing blood, gonorrheal sores, and quarantine. And that cry you hear every year is when a bar bat mitzvah kid realizes he or she has to write a drash about that. I love that parsha because it refuses sentimentality about the body. It insists that we attend to flesh and frailty, to contagion and containment, to life and to death. The opening lines particularly challenge our modern sensibilities. We greet news of pregnancy with hugs and wonder. We meet birth with balloons and bagels. The Torah says that a woman who gives birth enters a state of tum'ah, that gnarly word that is often mistranslated as impurity or uncleanliness. And she is separated from society for a while. The modern feminist reader bristles at this. Why stigmatize a new mother? Why not simply celebrate the miracle of her gestation, her vigor, and new life? Well, first of all, across cultures, new mothers have appreciated having time and space to recover and to adjust to motherhood. Call it quarantine or call it maternity leave, but that distance can be holy and a lifesaver. But secondly, I prefer to understand tuma as meaning life ebbing. Tahara, the opposite, is life waxing at its apex. Tuma, the most intense representation of which is a corpse, is life waning. It's when the body's not well, when blood and other fluids are not where they normally are inside the body. Childbirth contains both tahara, the miraculous influx of life, and tum'ah, vulnerability and blood, and an infinite encounter with mortality. But why does the Torah tend toward tum'ah at birth? My favorite interpretation suggests that it is because that woman just gave birth to a baby who will live, we hope, and who will suffer, and who will have pain, and who will die. That woman has created a being who will begin and who will end. This is brutally honest. You will likely not hear me giving this drash at an upcoming baby naming or bris. But the honesty of the Torah's stance is not cruelty, it is realism. And it's an invitation to responsibility and purpose. This baby will die, and we still celebrate its life, of course. Every child will struggle, just like every married couple will. And still we as society, as parents, choose over and over and over again to make the decision to bring that child, to bring this love into the world. Because it is worth it. With all of what the author William Styron called darkness visible, the at times overpowering heaviness of life, it is worth it. Our beloved religious rituals exemplify this paradox. How does every chuppah end? With a crash, with a shattering. We recall the destruction of Jerusalem, and we bring Jewish suffering from time immemorial to the forefront of our consciousness, precisely the apex of our joy. But the broken glass reverberates with other meanings too. My dear friend, Rabbi David Ingber, compares it to a woman's water breaking. That moment is the birth of your marriage. He sees the circling that bride and groom do as marking out an umbilical cord. The chuppah is a microcosm of a lifespan, a crucible of human evolution. And like all of it, it augurs some pain, even if it is not mentioned in the rabbi's pithy words to the smiling couple. Their married life may be long and hopefully exceedingly happy, but there will also be darkness. And even so, it is worth it. Some live within darkness that we can't fathom. How do they take steps forward? This summer, a colleague hosted members of a mishlachat, a delegation of Israelis who work at Jewish summer camps. And one of the guests at his home was Ori Megadish, a young woman from Kiryat Gat, Israel. Ori was taken hostage on October 7th. And Ori didn't want her presence announced ahead of time at this meal. But she told my colleague, if it comes up, I'll decide if I want to talk about it or not. At the Shabbat table, they were doing introductions. And she said her name was Ori from Kiryat Gat. One of the other guests said, wasn't there a hostage from Kiryat Gat? The room went quiet. Trying to change the subject, my colleague announced it was time to do Netilat Yadayim, to wash hands. And he then quietly told Ori that they could handle this any way she preferred. After Hamotzi, Ori slowly said, I'm the hostage from Kiryat Gat. I was in Gaza for 23 days. I was rescued by the IDF. I'm so grateful for that. It was horrible being a hostage on a level you can't imagine. All this happened to me, but it does not define me. That's what she said. All this happened to me, but it does not define me. What a noble, optimistic, tragedy-surmounting mantra for Ori, for all of us, for every birth, for every marriage. All of this trauma, all of this pain that life refuses to spare us from, they happened, they are happening, they will happen, they do not define us, they need not define life. Ori had loss more than we can fathom. But out of that, despite that, she has life, and we hope, great love. None of us can elude life's roughest edges. Some of the tears I'm going to shed under a chuppah next year will be tributaries of that truth. But while confronting rough edges is inevitable, succumbing to them is not. A colleague shared this poem from her community. Someone in her community wrote it. It begins like this. Old people sitting beside a fire. They have known one another forever. They have made it through the years of chronic conflict. They have worn down each other's rough edges. and they are so much softer with each other now. I love that image. The task of confronting the rough has led to the soft. There's no other way. It continues as if they have finally taken in just how sensitive and easily hurt the other is. They feel protective of one another. They never thought they would reach this place. It is God's gift to them for not giving up, for continuing to try. I love that image too. Seeing pain and even suffering, at least to some reasonable level, as an obligatory cost to being alive, and rewarded by divine grace for making it through, for clawing through the tum'ah thrown in your face, and achieving by dint of the effort and the worry and the lack of certainty as to how it was going to turn out, achieving a hard-earned tahara. The poem ends with words that I find to be lyrical and relational, theological, existential, all in a few short phrases. It ends, "Oh God, thank you. For the first time in my life, I feel like I am home. Home in a way I never imagined I would be able to feel. Home in her eyes, home in her arms, home in her heart, and God, home with you." The author only arrives at the home of life, having gone through the hard of life. Life is painful, and life is beautiful. At times, it can feel like it is not beautiful enough to warrant the pain that we have. That's a real feeling. But Judaism asserts that life can contain sufficient beauty, and so it is worth living. When those hard moments arrive, when Styron's darkness visible threatens, we don't have to submit to them. We could remember Ori, the freed hostage. Do not let your captivities define you. If you cry at a wedding, permit the tears to register the full complexity. If you're crying tonight about our democracy in shambles, you understand Parshat Tazria's very realistic take on childbirth. If you're wondering whether founding and maintaining a Jewish state is worth the cost, because at times Israel might abuse that power that Jews sought for 2,000 years, then you share noble company with Hillel and Shammai, wrestling honestly. From weddings to births, from Torah to Talmud, to modern Israeli pop music, which somehow always carries a deep resonance. In 2023, Benaya Rabbi composed a song called Beseder. Beseder. It's all right. Listen to the song. Ze beseder lo liot beseder. It's okay not to be okay. Ze beseder lashir kshekoev. It's okay to sing when it hurts. Ze beseder livkot kol boker. It's okay to cry every morning. And then the imperative, the message to every couple after the glass breaks, to every couple in shock and awe at the vulnerability of their new baby, to every human who lives and struggles, and to us. And despite it all, it is beseder, it is obligatory to get up. Yifashfesh ma'asav. Examine your deeds and make this short life a mashup of trauma and triumph, as exquisite as you can. When? Today. And tomorrow. And the day after that. At every rough edge, find something to smooth it. But get up and dance at every wedding. Let us cry because there's much to cry for. Let us mourn because it's the price of love. Let us lose let us live. Growing up in Connecticut, my parents had a framed poster on the wall of our home. It was displayed as true art, even though the poster itself probably cost a shekel at some cheap Jerusalem store. It was a close-up picture of drab, dry, brown earth filled with thorns. And the words on the poster said, "I never promised you a rose garden." The slogan bespoke a certain Zionist consensus in the 60s, 70s, and 80s as early Israel was still in its birth pangs. The land would not easily yield. Statehood would come into being only with sacrifice. A blooming desert, literally and figuratively, was not guaranteed. It would all require traversing barrenness, climbing over seemingly impossibly high walls, and crying and losing. That was the cost of sovereignty. That is the cost of life. No one ever promised you a rose garden. If anyone did, they were not being fair. But there are blossoms out there through the thicket. The thicket is ubiquitous. It is inevitable. But it need not define us. Is it all worth it? Make it worth it.